Joy thought her nightmare was over. She'd cleared her name, built a life helping others, and found peace. But when a desperate girl with an identical story begs for help, Joy discovers that some enemies never stop hunting you. And this time, the trap is so perfect, even she might not escape. The Facebook message arrived at 2 a.m., but Joy didn't see it until morning. She was 25 now, 3 years past the horror of being falsely accused, 3 years into running Second Chance Home, an NGO that provided shelter and education for orphan children across Lagos. The scared water seller was gone, replaced by a woman who'd learned to use her pain as purpose. "Miss Joy, please help me. I saved a child and now they're saying I'm a thief. Just like you. Please." The message was from someone named Mercy, 19 years old. Joy's coffee went cold as she read the story. A wealthy family's daughter nearly drowned in their pool. Mercy, working as a maid nearby, jumped in and saved her. The grateful family hired Mercy to work in their home. 2 months later, jewelry worth 15 million naira went missing. Mercy was the only suspect. "Michael, look at this," Joy called to her fiancé, who was making breakfast in their modest apartment near the NGO. Michael Okonkwo, the lawyer who'd saved her 3 years ago, read over her shoulder. His face darkened. "Joy, no. This is too convenient. She needs help. Or she's bait." Michael turned her to face him. "Think about it. Same story, same pattern, reaching out specifically to you? This could be a setup." Joy wanted to argue, but Michael was right to be cautious. She'd learned that lesson the hard way. Still, she remembered what it felt like to be desperate and alone, with no one believing you. "One meeting," she said. "Neutral location. If anything feels wrong, I walk away." Michael sighed, knowing he couldn't stop her. "I'm coming with you." They met Mercy at a cafe in Ikeja 2 days later. The girl who walked in made Joy's breath catch. It was like looking at a ghost, her own ghost from 3 years ago. Same desperate eyes, same thin frame from stress and poverty, same way of holding herself like she was trying not to take up too much space in the world. "Miss Joy, thank you for coming," Mercy said, tears already forming. "I didn't know who else to call. When I read about what happened to you, I thought you'd understand." Joy listened as Mercy told her story. The Oakley family. Mrs. Chioma Oakley. The accusation. The police. Every detail perfect, every beat familiar. Too familiar. But something was off. Mercy kept glancing at her phone, placed face down on the table. Her hands trembled when she mentioned the family's name. And when Joy asked specific questions about the house layout, Mercy's answers were vague, almost rehearsed. "Mercy," Joy said gently, "who told you about me? My case was in the news, but it was 3 years ago. I saw an old article when I was looking for help." "Which article?" Mercy's eyes darted to her phone again. It buzzed. She flinched but didn't pick it up. "Is someone waiting to hear from you?" Michael asked, his lawyer instincts sharp. "No, it's nothing." But Mercy's voice cracked, and Joy saw something she recognized. Fear. Not fear of them, but fear of someone else. "Mercy, who are you afraid of?" Joy asked. The girl's composure finally broke. "I can't. If I say anything wrong, I can't lose this chance. You're my only hope, Miss Joy. Please, please help me." As they left the cafe an hour later, Joy was torn. Every logical part of her brain screamed trap. But her heart remembered being that girl, broken and desperate. "I'm going to investigate," she told Michael. "But carefully." "We investigate," Michael corrected. "You don't do this alone." That night, as Joy lay awake thinking about Mercy's frightened eyes, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She opened the message and her blood ran cold. The photo showed a woman sitting in what looked like a prison visiting room. The woman was older now, thinner, but Joy would recognize that face anywhere. Patricia Adeyemi. And she was holding today's newspaper, proving the photo was recent. Below the image, one sentence. Some people never change. Some traps are just better hidden. Michael's background check on Mercy came back at midnight, and the results made Joy's stomach turn. The girl's full name was Mercy Obi. Her mother's maiden name, Adeyemi. She's Patricia's niece, Michael said, his voice tight. James Adeyemi's daughter. James. Patricia's brother. The one whose failing business had driven Patricia to steal and frame Joy in the first place. Joy felt like she'd been punched. She lied to us, Joy whispered. Or she didn't know we'd find out, Michael said. Either way, this is exactly the trap I warned you about. But Joy couldn't shake the memory of Mercy's genuine fear. What if she's telling the truth? What if she really is Patricia's niece but still innocent? Then she should have told us from the start. Joy knew he was right, but she had to be sure. The next morning, she went to confront Mercy at the address the girl had provided. A small room in Ajij, similar to where Joy had once lived. Mercy opened the door with swollen eyes. "Miss Joy, you're Patricia Adeyemi's niece," Joy said flatly. "Why didn't you tell me?" Mercy's face crumbled. "Because I knew you'd think exactly what you're thinking now. That I'm part of some plan. That I'm lying." She stepped back, letting Joy inside. The room was tiny, sparse, real. "My father suggested I contact you. He said you'd understand what it's like to be accused of something you didn't do. He said if anyone would help, it would be you." "Your father, James? The man whose debts caused all of this in the first place?" "My father who's been broken for 3 years," Mercy shot back, some fire finally showing. "Who lost everything. Who's been trying to make things right." She pulled out her phone, showed Joy photos of a modest apartment, a man who looked aged beyond his years. "He's not the villain. Neither am I." "Then who is?" "I don't know. That's why I need your help." Mercy was crying now. "Miss Joy, I swear on my life, I didn't steal anything. But no one believes me. Just like no one believed you. And if my Aunt Patricia is involved somehow, I don't know about it. I've never even met her. She was arrested before I really knew what was happening." Joy studied the girl. Either Mercy was telling the truth, or she was a better actress than Patricia had ever been. "I need to talk to your father," Joy said finally. James Adeyemi lived in Surulere now, in a building worlds away from the wealthy life his sister had once known. He looked smaller than Joy remembered from the news coverage. Thinner, grayer, beaten down by life. "Miss Joy," he said when he opened the door, and she saw genuine shame in his eyes. "Thank you for coming. I know you have every reason to hate me." "I don't hate you," Joy said, surprising herself with the truth. "I just need to understand what's happening." James made them tea with shaking hands. "My daughter is innocent. That's the only thing I'm certain of anymore. When she told me what happened, I thought of you immediately. If anyone would fight for someone falsely accused, it would be you. And you didn't think it was suspicious? That her story is identical to mine?" "I thought it was tragic," James said quietly, "that the same cruelty we inflicted on you is now happening to my daughter. Maybe that's karma." He looked up at Joy. "My sister destroyed you to save me, and all she did was destroy us both. I've been trying to make amends ever since. I thought helping Mercy contact you was, I don't know, a way to do something right. Is Patricia involved in this?" "I don't know. She writes to Daniel sometimes, but not to me. We haven't spoken since the trial." James's voice broke. "But Miss Joy, if she is involved, Mercy doesn't know. My daughter is innocent. Please, you have to believe me." Joy wanted to. But as she left James's apartment and stepped into the Surulere afternoon heat, her phone buzzed again. Another message. Another photo. This time Patricia was clearer, closer to the camera. She was smiling, that calculating smile Joy remembered too well. And this time, there was text. "Some people never change." Some traps are just better hidden. Joy stared at the message, her heart pounding. Patricia knew. Patricia was involved. And somehow, Joy was already caught in whatever web had been spun. The question was, how deep did the trap go? The Oakley mansion in Ikoyi was everything Joy expected. Gates that could stop a tank, guards in crisp uniforms, marble visible even from the street. Michael insisted on coming with her, and Joy was grateful. Being back in a house like this made her skin crawl with memory. Mrs. Chioma Oakley met them in a sitting room that probably cost more than Joy's entire NGO budget. She was around Patricia's age, light-skinned and expensively maintained, with the same cold eyes that looked at Joy like she was something scraped off a shoe. "So you're the woman who thinks my family is lying," Mrs. Oakley said, skipping any pretense of courtesy. "I'm the woman who knows what it's like to be falsely accused," Joy replied evenly. "I just want to understand what happened." Mrs. Oakley's version of events was smooth, practiced. Mercy had been hired as a maid. Jewelry had gone missing from Mrs. Oakley's bedroom, a diamond necklace, ruby earrings, items worth 15 million naira. Only Mercy had access. The police were called immediately. "But the timeline doesn't match," Michael pointed out, his lawyer brain working. "You say the jewelry went missing on a Tuesday, but you didn't report it until Friday. Why the delay?" Mrs. Oakley's perfect composure slipped for just a second. "I wanted to be sure before making such a serious accusation. Or you needed time to make sure the story held up?" Joy asked quietly. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "I think we're done here," Mrs. Oakley said, standing. "My family has been more than patient with this situation. That girl stole from us, and she'll pay for it." But as they were being escorted out, Joy caught a glimpse of a young maid in the hallway. The girl's eyes went wide when she saw Joy, and she quickly looked away, but not before Joy saw recognition and fear. "Wait," Joy called out, but the maid disappeared into another room. In the car, Michael was already making notes. Something's wrong with this case. The timeline, the delayed report, that staff member's reaction. "I'm going to request the police report." "I want to talk to the other staff," Joy said. "Alone. They won't talk to you, you're a lawyer. But they might talk to someone who used to be one of them." It took 3 days and Uncle Samuel's help, he still worked for Richard and knew people in every wealthy household in Lagos, to arrange secret meetings with 2 of the Oakley staff members. The first, a young man named Emeka who worked as a driver, was too scared to say much. But he confirmed what Joy suspected. Madam Oakley, she friends with many big women. They always meeting, always planning something. And that Mercy, she was kind girl. I don't think she take anything. The second staff member, the cook Auntie Blessing, was braver. "Something not right in that house," she whispered as they sat in a church courtyard where no one would see them. "Before that girl Mercy come, I hear Madam on phone talking about teaching them lesson, and putting them in place. Then Mercy arrive, then trouble start. Teaching who a lesson?" Joy asked. "These maids, all these young girls who think they can work for big family and get better life. Madam Oakley, she don't like that. She tell her friends, people getting too bold, forgetting their place." Auntie Blessing looked around nervously. "Miss Joy, you be careful. These people, they have power. They can do anything." That night, Daniel called. Joy hadn't spoken to him in months. He was in his final year at University of Lagos, focused on taking over his father's business. But his voice was tight with worry. "Joy, I need to tell you something about my mother." Joy's heart sank. "What about her?" "She's up for early release. Good behavior. She could be out in 2 months. Daniel paused. "And Joy, she's been writing me letters. In one of them, she mentioned a girl named Mercy. She said, family takes care of family, and soon everyone will see what loyalty really means." Joy felt cold. "Daniel, I need to see those letters. I'm bringing them to you tomorrow." "But Joy," his voice cracked. I think my mother is involved in whatever's happening to this girl. And I think it's about destroying you." After Daniel hung up, Joy sat in the darkness of her small office at the NGO, surrounded by photos of the children she'd helped. She'd built something good from her pain. She'd created a life that mattered. And now Patricia was coming for her again. Her phone rang at 11 p.m. Mercy's name on the screen. Joy answered. "They're coming for me." Mercy was crying, hysterical. "My Aunt Patricia, she used me. She set all of this up. But Miss Joy, I swear I didn't know. I swear." "Mercy, slow down. And now she's threatening my father. If I tell the truth, she'll expose him for the illegal loans, the money-lending schemes. He'll go to prison. My little siblings will have no one. Miss Joy, what do I do? I can't let my family be destroyed, but I can't let you be destroyed either." "Where are you?" Joy demanded. "Home, but I don't know how long I'm safe. She has people watching me. She knows everything." Mercy's voice dropped to a terrified whisper. "Miss Joy, my aunt is a monster. And I led her right to you." The line went dead. Joy stared at her phone, Patricia's warning echoing in her mind. Some traps are just better hidden. And this trap, Joy was beginning to realize, was far bigger than anything she'd imagined. Mercy arrived at the NGO an hour later, escorted by Michael, who'd picked her up from her apartment. The girl was shaking, mascara streaked down her face, looking even younger than her 19 years. "Tell us everything," Joy said gently, sitting her down with tea. "From the beginning. The truth this time." And Mercy told them. Patricia had orchestrated everything from prison through James. She'd used her elite social circle connections, women like Mrs. Chioma Oakley, who she'd known for years, to create the perfect revenge plot. The plan was simple and brilliant. Recreate Joy's exact situation with someone connected to Patricia's family. Mrs. Oakley needed to get rid of a maid anyway, Mercy explained, her voice hollow. One who was asking too many questions about wages, threatening to report labor violations. "When my Aunt Patricia offered her a way to do it that would also destroy you," Mrs. Oakley jumped at the chance. "So they set you up?" Michael asked. "Worse. They used me." Mercy's hands were shaking around her teacup. "My father told me Mrs. Oakley was a friend who needed help, someone who'd give me a job. I thought I was just working there. I had no idea they'd planted the jewelry in my room, that they'd discover it missing, that the whole thing was staged." "And contacting Joy? That was the final step. My aunt told my father that when the accusation happened, I should reach out to Joy. She said Joy would defend me publicly, use her platform to fight for me. And then," Mercy's voice broke, "then they'd reveal proof that I really was guilty. Surveillance footage they'd doctored, witnesses they'd paid off. Joy's reputation would be destroyed. Everyone would think she'd been fooled by a criminal, that her judgment was terrible, that her NGO couldn't be trusted." Joy felt sick. It was perfect. Diabolical, but perfect. If Patricia had pulled this off, Joy's credibility as an advocate would have been shattered. Second Chance Home would have lost donors. Everything she'd built would have crumbled. "But you're telling us now," Joy said. "Why?" "Because I'm not a monster," Mercy whispered. "When I realized what they were doing, what they wanted me to do to you, I couldn't. You saved yourself once. You built something beautiful from nothing. I couldn't be the person who destroyed that." She looked up at Joy with desperate eyes. "But now my aunt is threatening my father. She says if I don't go through with the plan, she'll make sure he goes to prison for the illegal moneylending. He'll lose everything. My younger siblings, they're only 12 and 14. They need him." Michael and Joy exchanged looks. "Mercy, did Patricia say anything else? About other cases, other families?" Mercy nodded slowly. "She mentioned something to my father once, about how Mrs. Oakley wasn't the only one who needed her help. About how there were other families who wanted to handle troublesome staff, quietly. I didn't understand it then, But now we know she's been running a scheme, Michael finished grimly. Using false accusations to help wealthy families get rid of domestic workers they don't want. Joy stood up, pacing. This was bigger than she'd thought. Bigger than just revenge on her. Patricia had found a way to weaponize Joy's own trauma, turning it into a business model for oppressing the vulnerable. We need to go to the police, Michael said. With what evidence? Joy countered. A girl saying her aunt told her father something? Patricia's not stupid. She's been doing this from prison, keeping her hands clean. We need proof. Then we get proof, a new voice said from the doorway. Daniel walked in, looking older than his 20 years. I've been listening from the hallway. Sorry for eavesdropping, but I needed to hear this. He held up a folder. These are my mother's letters. I've read them all now, really read them. She's been dropping hints, bragging about helping friends and teaching lessons. It's all coded, but it's there. Daniel, you don't have to. Yes, I do, Daniel cut Joy off. My mother destroyed you once. I won't let her do it again. I won't let her do it to anyone else. He looked at Mercy. We're going to stop her. All of us. Joy wanted to hug him but settled for a grateful nod. First, we need to secure James. If Patricia's threatening him. We need to go now, Michael said, already grabbing his keys. If Patricia knows Mercy's talking, she'll act fast. They rushed to James's apartment in Surrey, Michael driving like he was fleeing a crime scene. But when they arrived, the door was open. The apartment was ransacked, furniture overturned, drawers pulled out, papers scattered everywhere. And James was gone. On the small dining table, held down by a coffee cup, was a note. Joy recognized the handwriting immediately. Patricia's elegant script, the same handwriting that had once signed Joy's employment papers. Come to the prison. Alone. Let's finish what we started. You have 24 hours before I hand James over to the people he owes money to. They won't be gentle. Mercy collapsed into a chair, sobbing. Daniel pulled out his phone, calling his father's security team. Michael was already on with the police. But Joy just stared at the note, feeling the old fear rising. She'd thought she was done with Patricia Adeyemi. She'd thought that nightmare was over. She'd been wrong. Patricia's game was just beginning. And this time, the stakes weren't just Joy's reputation. This time, people might die. Michael tried to stop her. Daniel offered to go with her. But Joy knew Patricia's terms, alone, or James died. So at 2 p.m. the next day, Joy walked into Kirikiri maximum security prison by herself, her heart pounding with every step. The visiting room was grim, metal tables bolted to the floor, guards watching everything, the smell of disinfectant failing to mask decades of despair. And there, in an orange prison uniform, sat Patricia Adeyemi. 3 years had changed her. The elegant woman who'd once dripped in gold jewelry and designer clothes was gone. This Patricia was thinner, harder, with grey streaking her hair and lines etched deep around her cold eyes. But those eyes still held the same calculating intelligence that had nearly destroyed Joy. You came, Patricia said, almost sounding surprised. I wasn't sure you would. Where's James? Joy demanded, staying standing. Sit down, Joy. We have things to discuss. I'm not playing games with you, Patricia. Where is James? Patricia smiled, that familiar, cruel smile. Still so self-righteous. That's what I admired about you, you know. Even when the whole world thought you were a thief, you held on to your dignity. It was almost inspiring. She leaned back in her chair. But dignity doesn't change reality. And the reality is, I'm in control here. You're in prison. Prison is just another place to build connections, Patricia said calmly. You'd be surprised how many powerful people end up here. How many favors can be traded. How much influence still exists behind these walls. She tapped her fingers on the table. I've had 3 years to think, Joy. 3 years to watch you on the news, building your little charity, becoming some sort of hero. It made me sick. So you decided to destroy me again. I decided to show you that you're not special. That you were just lucky. Patricia's mask of calm cracked slightly, showing the rage underneath. I rotted in here while you became a saint. The girl who sold water in traffic gets to be the face of justice? The orphan who got too close to my family gets to lecture Nigeria about integrity? No. I couldn't allow that. So you used your own niece. James owed me. After everything I did to protect him, to save his pathetic business, he owed me. Providing mercy for the plan was just payment. Patricia waved a hand dismissively. Besides, the girl was never in real danger. Mrs. Oakley wasn't going to actually prosecute. It was just theater, get you to defend Mercy publicly, then reveal she was actually guilty and I'd helped catch her. Your reputation destroyed, my good deed done, early release granted. Everyone wins. Except Mercy. Except me. Except all the other young women you've been helping wealthy families destroy. Patricia's eyes narrowed. So Mercy told you about that. The little traitor. There are 5 other cases, Joy said, her voice shaking with anger. 5 other young women you've helped frame for theft, assault, who knows what else. All to help your wealthy friends get rid of workers they didn't want to pay fairly. 7, actually, Patricia corrected coolly. And yes, it was quite profitable. These families needed a way to handle difficult staff, ones who asked too many questions, who threatened to report labor violations, who forgot their place. I provided a service. For a fee, of course. Money deposited into an account for when I get out. She smiled. I learned from you, Joy. When life knocks you down, you build something new. I built a business. Joy felt rage so pure it burned. You built it on the lives of vulnerable young women. Women like I used to be. Women like you still are, Patricia shot back. You think you've escaped poverty? You think running a charity makes you untouchable? Joy, you're one scandal away from being that water seller again. That's what I'm teaching you. That's what this whole plan is about, showing you that your success is an illusion. I can take it away any time I want. Not if I expose you first. Patricia laughed. With what evidence? The word of my niece, who was planted in the Oakley house by her own father. The letters I sent Daniel, which are deliberately vague. Some complaints from domestic workers. Do you know how many false accusations they make against their employers every year? You have nothing, Joy. Nothing that will stick. I have James. Once we find him. If you find him. And if he's still able to talk when you do. Patricia leaned forward. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to drop this investigation. You're going to tell Mercy to plead guilty to whatever charges Mrs. Oakley wants to file. You're going to publicly apologize for rushing to judgment. And in return, I'll tell you where James is being held. He'll have some broken bones, but he'll live. And if I refuse? Then James dies, and I make sure everyone knows you could have saved him but chose your pride instead. How will that look for the great advocate Joy? The woman who let her enemy's brother die rather than compromise. Patricia's smile was venomous. Either way, I win. Either you're humiliated, or you're a murderer. Choose. Joy stood up, her legs shaking but her voice steady. You want to know what I choose? I choose to fight. Not just for James, but for Mercy, for Blessing, for every single woman you've helped destroy. You think you're teaching me that success is an illusion? You're wrong. You're teaching me that evil exists, and it needs to be stopped. Noble speech, Patricia said. But words don't save lives. You have 48 hours. As Joy turned to leave, Patricia called out one more thing. Oh, and Joy. This isn't just about me. The families I work with, they have money, influence, connections at the highest levels. You go after them, you'll have more enemies than you can count. Are you really willing to risk everything you've built? Are your principles worth dying for? Joy looked back at Patricia one last time. They're worth living for. That's something you never understood. She walked out of the prison into the Lagos afternoon heat, her phone already ringing with Michael's number. But before she could answer, a text came through from an unknown number. It was a video file. With trembling hands, Joy opened it. The shaky footage showed a man tied to a chair in what looked like an abandoned warehouse. James. His face was bruised, one eye swollen shut, blood dried on his shirt. Behind him stood two men Joy didn't recognize, their faces hidden by shadows. A voice, not Patricia's, someone deeper, male, spoke over the video. Patricia was just the middleman. The families we represent have too much to lose. End your investigation or James pays the ultimate price. You have 48 hours. The video cut to black. Joy stood frozen on the prison steps, watching her phone screen, feeling the weight of impossible choices crushing down on her. Save James, or save the truth. Protect herself, or fight for justice. For 3 years, she'd been trying to leave this nightmare behind. Now she realized, the nightmare had only just begun. But you didn't die. You survived. And now you're going to help us save others. By the time they got back to Lagos, it was dawn. Michael called with news. He'd found James. The private Joy didn't sleep that night. By dawn, her small office at the NGO was full of people who'd become her family over the past 3 years. Michael, exhausted but determined. Daniel, who'd called his father's connections and was ready to use every resource the Adeyemi name could provide. And standing by the window, looking out at the Lagos sunrise, were Uncle Samuel and Mom Ngozi. We heard you needed help, Mom Ngozi said simply, pulling Joy into a fierce hug. You think we forget how you suffered? How that wicked woman destroyed you? We don't forget, my dear. And we don't abandon family. Uncle Samuel nodded. I've been talking to people. The gatemen, the drivers, the cooks in all the big houses. There are whispers. Families who've suddenly had staff arrested for theft. Young women who disappeared. Everyone too scared to talk, but the stories are there. I can get the names, Daniel added. My father has business relationships with half of Lagos elite. If I tell him what Patricia's been doing, he'll help us identify who she was working with. Richard Adeyemi arrived an hour later, remarried now to a kind woman who actually smiled at Joy with genuine warmth. He looked older than 3 years should have aged him, the burden of Patricia's crimes still weighing on his shoulders. Joy, I'm so sorry, he said. I should have known Patricia wouldn't stop. I should have. You couldn't have known, Joy interrupted. None of us could. But we can stop her now. Richard pulled out a folder. These are the 5 families Daniel mentioned Patricia might be working with. All have had domestic worker incidents in the past year. All are in Patricia's social circle. And all have one thing in common. They're terrified of labor regulation, of being exposed for how they treat their staff. Michael spread the files across Joy's desk. The Oakley family. The Obi family. The Williams family. The Adewumi family. The Dairo family. 5 of the wealthiest households in Lagos, and all of them potentially involved in Patricia's scheme. We need evidence, Michael said. Real evidence. And we need to find the other victims Patricia mentioned. I can help with that, a quiet voice said from the doorway. Mercy stood there, looking like she'd aged years overnight. I know where my aunt keeps her records. My father told me once, before all this started, that she had an insurance file. Evidence she kept in case anyone ever tried to betray her. It's in a storage unit in Festac. He has the key. But James is missing, I know. But I know where he hides spare keys. If the storage unit key is there. Mercy looked at Joy with desperate hope. Maybe we can get the evidence without needing to trade for James's life. It was a long shot, but it was something. While Michael filed emergency motions to delay any prosecution of Mercy, Daniel used his resources to hire private investigators to track down the other 5 women Patricia had mentioned. Uncle Samuel and Mom Ngozi worked their network of household staff, gathering testimonies. And Joy, with Mercy and Richard, went to James's ransacked apartment to search for the key. They found it taped under a drawer in the kitchen, a small key with a number tag. The storage facility was across town, a maze of identical units behind a chain-link fence. It took 2 hours and a lot of convincing the manager to let them into James's unit without him present. Inside, in a locked filing cabinet, they found Patricia's insurance. 20 years of records. Letters, emails, bank statements, recordings. Patricia had documented everything, every scheme, every payoff, every family she'd worked with. It was enough evidence to bring down a dozen wealthy families and expose a corruption network that had been operating for years. But more importantly, they found a list. 7 names. 7 young women Patricia had helped destroy. Mercy had been number 8. "We have to find these women," Joy said, photographing every document. "They're the real evidence. Their testimonies, combined with these records. We'll never convict anyone," Michael finished. "The families won't be able to cover this up." They located 4 of the women within days. All were terrified, all had been traumatized, but all agreed to talk when they learned they weren't alone. The 5th woman, though, had disappeared 3 months ago. Her name was Blessing Okafor, 23 years old, accused of stealing from the Williams family. Her family hadn't heard from her since she'd tried to fight the case and threatened to go to the media. "She's dead," one of the other victims whispered. "She has to be." They wouldn't let her talk. But Uncle Samuel had one more lead. A contact at a church in Badagry claimed a young woman matching Blessing's description had been staying there, too frightened to come out of hiding. "I'll go," Joy said immediately. "Not alone," Michael insisted. "You're needed here. Building the legal case, coordinating with the police. Daniel, you too. You need to be ready to present this to your father's media contacts." Joy looked at her fiancé. "This is what I do, Michael. I find the lost girls. Let me do this." So Joy drove to Badagry alone, following Uncle Samuel's directions to a small church on the outskirts of town. The priest who met her was cautious but kind, and after some convincing, he led her to a small room behind the sanctuary. Blessing sat on a narrow bed, barely more than a child, visibly pregnant, and so thin Joy's heart broke just looking at her. "Are you police?" Blessing asked, voice hollow. "No. I'm Joy. I run an NGO for people like us. People who've been accused, who've been hurt." Joy sat down slowly. "I know what the Williams family did to you. I know you've been hiding. But Blessing, we're building a case. We have evidence. We can stop them." "They'll kill me," Blessing whispered. "They'll kill more women if we don't stop them," Joy said gently. "I was accused too, 3 years ago. I know how this feels. But I also know that silence only protects our abusers." It took hours, but finally Blessing agreed to come back to Lagos with Joy. As they drove through the night, Blessing told her story, how she'd questioned why she wasn't being paid properly, how the family's son had assaulted her when she threatened to report them, how they'd framed her for theft when she'd gotten pregnant. "I should have died," Blessing said flatly. "That's what they wanted. For me to disappear." Investigators Daniel hired had tracked the loan sharks to an uncompleted building in Oja. The police were there now, making arrests. James was alive, badly beaten but alive. He was being taken to the hospital. At the hospital, James was barely conscious, but he managed to whisper the names, all 5 families, exactly matching the list they'd found in Patricia's records. His testimony, combined with Blessing's, with Mercy's confession, with the other victims' statements, with Patricia's own documents. It was enough. But as Joy stood in the hospital corridor, feeling victory within reach, her phone rang. Mrs. Chioma Oakley's number. Joy answered on speaker, with Michael and Daniel beside her. "You've been busy, Miss Joy." Mrs. Oakley's voice was ice cold. "We know about the women you've collected. We know about James's testimony. We know everything. Then you know you're finished, Joy said. Are we? Mrs. Oakley laughed. Tomorrow morning, every news outlet in Lagos will run a story about Joy's charity, the front for a prostitution ring. We have photos of these women going in and out of your NGO. We have witnesses ready to testify about the suspicious activities. We have financial records that will make it look like you've been taking payments. Joy felt cold. You're lying. Am I? Drop this case, Joy. Convince those women to stay silent. Or by tomorrow, you won't just lose your charity. You'll be in the cell next to Patricia. Your choice. You have until midnight. The line went dead. Joy looked at Michael and Daniel, seeing her own horror reflected in their faces. After everything, finding the evidence, getting the testimonies, building the case, the families were going to destroy her anyway, just like Patricia had warned. Some traps, Joy realized, were designed so that even when you saw them coming, you couldn't escape. The war room at Second Chance Home had never been fuller. Joy's small office was packed with people at 10 p.m., just 2 hours before Mrs. Oakley's deadline. Michael, Daniel, Uncle Samuel, Mom Ngozi, Richard, Mercy, Blessing, and the 4 other victims whose lives Patricia had helped destroy. We can't let them win, one of the victims, a young woman named Faith, said fiercely. I've been silent for a year. I won't be silent anymore. But if Joy goes to prison, another began. If Joy goes to prison, we all fight harder, Mercy interrupted. She looked at Joy with something like reverence. You jumped into a lagoon to save someone you didn't know. You're facing prison to save all of us. The least we can do is stand with you. Joy felt tears threatening. 3 years ago, she'd been alone. Now she had an army. There's only one way to beat them, Daniel said suddenly. We go public first. Before they can release their lies, we release the truth. All of it. Live. On television. Where they can't control the narrative. I can arrange it, Richard said. I have connections at Channels TV. They've been wanting an interview with you for months, Joy. We get them to do a live special tonight. That's less than 2 hours, Michael pointed out. Then we move fast. Daniel was already on his phone. Dad's right. We control the story or they control us. We choose. At 11:15 p.m., Joy sat in a television studio in Victoria Island, her heart pounding. Beside her sat Mercy, Blessing, and Faith. Behind the cameras were Daniel, Michael, Uncle Samuel, and Mom Ngozi. Richard had called in every favor he had to make this happen. The interviewer, a respected journalist named Mrs. Olayemi, had been briefed. She understood what was at stake. We live in 5, 4, 3. The camera operator counted down. And then Joy was on television, live across Nigeria, with no script and everything to lose. My name is Joy, she began, her voice steady despite her racing heart. 3 years ago, I was accused of theft by the Adeyemi family. I was innocent, but I was also alone and powerless. Tonight, I'm here with 3 other women who've suffered the same fate. And we're here to expose a network of wealthy families who've been systematically destroying the lives of domestic workers across Lagos. For the next 90 minutes, they told everything. Joy told Patricia's story of revenge. Mercy explained how she'd been used as a pawn. Blessing, visibly pregnant, described her assault and framing. Faith and the others detailed their own cases. Michael presented the evidence, documents, recordings, financial records. Daniel held up his mother's letters, his voice breaking as he read passages that proved Patricia's involvement. They named the families. All 5 of them. Live, on national television, with evidence to back every claim. Joy watched the studio monitors showing Twitter exploding. #Justice for Domestic Workers began trending. Then #Arrest Oakley. Then #End Labor Abuse. The country was watching, and the country was furious. At 12:47 a.m., just 47 minutes after Mrs. Oakley's deadline, Joy's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You just declared war on some of the most powerful families in Nigeria. I hope you're ready for what comes next. But Joy was ready. Because for the first time in 3 years, she wasn't fighting alone. By morning, the police had no choice but to act. Public pressure was too intense. Mrs. Chioma Oakley was arrested at her home, along with 2 other family members on the list. The other families were being investigated. Patricia's records had been turned over to law enforcement. It wasn't over. Joy knew that. Wealthy people had lawyers, connections, ways to fight back. But the narrative had shifted. These families could no longer operate in shadows. And then, 3 days after the television interview, Joy received a call from the prison warden. Miss Joy, Patricia Adeyemi has collapsed. We're taking her to the hospital. She's asking for you. Says she has information about human trafficking operations, something about the families going beyond just theft accusations. Joy looked at Michael. It could be a trap. Or she's finally ready to tell the whole truth, Michael said. Your choice. Joy thought about Blessing's pregnant belly, about Mercy's tears, about Faith's rage, about all the women still out there, still suffering, still silent. I'm going, she said. Then I'm coming with you, Michael insisted. They found Patricia in a private hospital room, handcuffed to the bed, looking pale and weak. A heart attack, the doctors said. Stress-induced. She'd live, but she was genuinely ill this time. You actually did it, Patricia whispered when she saw Joy. You destroyed them. You destroyed me. Again. You destroyed yourself, Joy said quietly. I just told the truth. Patricia laughed bitterly, then winced in pain. The truth. Yes. Let me tell you some more truth then, since I'm apparently dying anyway. She looked at Joy with something almost like respect. The families weren't just getting rid of troublesome staff, Joy. They were trafficking them. Joy felt her blood turn cold. What? The women who disappeared after being accused, they didn't just run away. They were sold. To families abroad, to brothels, to labor camps. Patricia's voice was flat, clinical. I connected them to buyers. For a price. I told myself they were criminals anyway, that they deserved whatever happened. But they weren't criminals. They were like you, trying to survive. Michael was already recording on his phone. How many women? 12, maybe 15 over 2 years. I kept records. I always keep records. Patricia's eyes closed. It's in a safety deposit box. My lawyer has the key. Bank of Industry, Victoria Island, box 2847. Why are you telling us this? Joy asked. Patricia opened her eyes, and for the first time, Joy saw something other than calculation there. She saw shame. Because I became exactly what I feared most. Someone who doesn't matter. Someone whose life was so empty that all I could do was hurt people to feel powerful. A tear slid down Patricia's cheek. You proved you matter, Joy. You proved your life has meaning. Maybe it's time I prove something too. Maybe it's time I stop being a monster and start being human. It doesn't erase what you did, Joy said. I know. But maybe it stops what I haven't done yet. Patricia's voice was fading. Those families, they'll come after you. They'll do anything to protect themselves. Promise me you'll fight them. Promise me you'll save those girls. I promise, Joy said. Patricia nodded once, then closed her eyes. Good. Then maybe I did one right thing in my life. With Patricia's testimony and the evidence in the safety deposit box, Michael and the police dismantled an entire trafficking network. All 5 families were implicated. 3 of them were arrested within a week. The others were under investigation that would eventually lead to convictions. James recovered from his beating and gave his testimony, accepting his role in the scheme but cooperating fully. The prosecutors agreed to reduced charges in exchange for his cooperation. And Joy, Joy stood in her NGO surrounded by the women they'd saved, feeling something she hadn't felt since that day on Third Mainland Bridge 3 years ago. She felt like she could breathe again. But the fight, she knew, was far from over. There were still women missing, still families protecting their secrets, still a system designed to silence the vulnerable. The difference now was that Joy had an army. And she knew how to use her voice. The war had just begun. But for the first time, Joy believed they could win. The backlash started within days of Patricia's revelations. The family's lawyers launched coordinated attacks, defamation suits, motions to suppress evidence, media campaigns suggesting Joy was seeking attention and making false accusations. But public opinion had shifted too far. The evidence was too solid. And most importantly, Joy wasn't alone. Daniel, using his position as heir to the Adeyemi Empire, called a press conference. Standing with his father Richard, he publicly denounced his mother's actions while pledging millions from the family company to support domestic worker rights and Joy's expanded NGO. "My mother did terrible things," Daniel said into the cameras, his voice breaking but strong. "But she also did one final good thing," she told the truth. "As her son, I can't undo her crimes. But I can choose to stand with her victims. I can choose justice." The video went viral. #Daniel Adeyemi trended for days. Young Nigerians praised his courage. Domestic workers across Lagos began coming forward with their own stories of abuse. Uncle Samuel and Mom Ngozi appeared on talk shows, describing the fear and exploitation household staff faced daily. Mom Ngozi's tearful account of staying silent while Joy suffered, and her determination never to be silent again, moved millions. But the families weren't giving up. 3 days before the preliminary hearings were scheduled to begin, Joy received Mrs. Oakley's final threat. Mrs. Oakley had been released on bail, her family's money and connections temporarily buying her freedom. And she was ready to burn everything down. "You've been busy, Miss Joy," came the call at 3 a.m. Joy was used to sleepless nights now. "We know about the women you've collected. We know where you're keeping them. Drop this case now, or tomorrow's headlines will say you've been running a prostitution ring disguised as an NGO. We have photos. We have witnesses. Your choice, your reputation or theirs." Joy looked at Michael sleeping beside her, at the phone in her hand, at the choice being offered. 3 years ago, she would have been terrified. She would have thought she had to choose between protecting herself and doing what was right. But 3 years ago, she'd been alone. "Do your worst," Joy said quietly. "Because we're about to do ours." She hung up and made her own call, to Daniel, to Richard's media contacts, to the television producer who'd given them airtime before. "We need to go live again," she said. "Tomorrow morning. Before they can release whatever lies they've prepared." By 8 a.m., Joy was back in a television studio. But this time, she wasn't alone. Beside her sat Mercy, Blessing, Faith, and the 4 other victims. Behind them stood Daniel, Michael, Uncle Samuel, Mom Ngozi, Richard, and James, recently released from the hospital and ready to testify. 3 days ago, Joy began, looking directly into the camera. "The families we've accused threatened to destroy my reputation if I didn't drop the case. They said they'd claim my NGO is a front for prostitution. They said they'd produce false evidence and fake witnesses. They're trying to use the same playbook that was used against me 3 years ago. Destroy the accuser's credibility to hide your own crimes." She pulled out her phone, playing the recording of Mrs. Oakley's threat. Then she showed the photos the families had been planning to release. Doctored images, manipulated timestamps, carefully staged evidence that meant nothing without context. "So we're here to provide context," Joy continued. "We're here to show exactly how wealthy families silence domestic workers. We're here to name names, show evidence, and demand justice. Not just for us, but for every vulnerable person in Nigeria who's been told their voice doesn't matter." One by one, they told their stories. Not just the victims Patricia had helped destroy, but other domestic workers who'd come forward after the first interview. Women who'd been beaten, underpaid, abused, discarded. Men who'd worked for decades without benefits or protection. Children who'd been trafficked as house helps at age 8. The interviews went on for 3 hours, streaming live across every major platform. Michael presented the legal evidence, Patricia's documents, the trafficking records, financial trails connecting the families to the scheme. Daniel read more of his mother's letters, his voice steady despite the tears on his face. By noon, Nigeria was on fire with outrage. #Arrest them all was the top trend worldwide. International media picked up the story. UN agencies called for investigations. The Nigerian government, facing global pressure, announced a special task force to investigate domestic worker abuse and trafficking. And the family's carefully planned smear campaign? It died before it could launch. Their doctored evidence looked pathetic next to the mountain of real evidence Joy's team presented. Their fake witnesses were exposed when social media users found evidence they'd been paid. Their lawyers' arguments collapsed under public scrutiny. Mrs. Chioma Oakley was rearrested that afternoon, bail revoked. The other families involved saw their assets frozen pending investigation. Patricia, still in the hospital under guard, watched the news coverage from her bed. That evening, as Joy sat in her office surrounded by the people who'd become her family, her phone rang. The prison warden again. "Miss Joy, Patricia saw the interviews. She wants you to know. She says you won. She says she's glad you won." Joy hung up and looked around at the faces surrounding her. Mercy, hopeful and healing. Blessing, her hand on her swollen belly. Faith and the others, no longer victims but survivors. Michael, her rock. Daniel, choosing justice over family loyalty. Uncle Samuel and Mom Ngozi, proof that good people exist everywhere. Richard, using his privilege to fight for those who had none. James, broken but trying to make amends. "We didn't win yet," Joy said. "We're just getting started." Because the truth was, this case would take years to fully prosecute. Some of the wealthy families would find ways to escape justice. Some victims would never be found. The system that allowed this abuse would fight back hard. But something had changed. The silence had been broken. The shame had been lifted. Domestic workers across Nigeria were no longer invisible. And Joy, the girl who'd once sold water in traffic, who'd been accused and destroyed and rebuilt herself, Joy was no longer just a survivor. She was a movement. The fight wasn't over. But for the first time, Joy believed they might actually win. The call came at midnight, 2 weeks after the second television interview. Patricia Adeyemi had collapsed again. This time it was serious. Joy almost didn't go. She'd said everything she needed to say to Patricia. But something in the warden's voice made her reconsider, a note of genuine urgency, of Patricia's desperation to see her one last time. So Joy drove to the hospital where Patricia was being held under guard, Michael insisting on coming despite the late hour. Patricia looked small in the hospital bed, hooked up to monitors that beeped steadily. Her face was grey, her breathing labored. The heart attack was real this time, and severe. "You came," Patricia whispered when she saw Joy. "The warden said it was urgent." "I'm dying," Patricia said bluntly. "The doctors say days, maybe a week. Turns out stress and guilt can actually kill you." She attempted a smile. Who knew? Joy sat in the chair beside the bed, Michael standing protectively behind her. "What do you want, Patricia?" "To give you everything." Patricia gestured weakly to a folder on the bedside table. "My lawyer brought it this morning. It's all there. Names, dates, financial records, recordings. Not just the 5 families we discussed. 15 families total. 23 domestic workers trafficked. Connections to international networks. Everything." Joy picked up the folder, hands shaking. "Why now?" "Because I'm dying, and I'm terrified." Patricia's voice broke. "I'm terrified that when I die, all I'll be is a monster. That my son Daniel will only remember me as the woman who destroyed people. That my whole life will be summed up as evil and nothing more. You were evil, Joy said quietly. You destroyed lives, trafficked women, used your own niece. I know. Patricia's cry was anguished. I know what I am. But Joy, you have to understand. I didn't start out wanting to be this person. I started out wanting to matter. To be more than just Richard's wife. More than just a woman from a failing family trying to maintain status. I wanted to be powerful. And you became powerful by crushing people weaker than you. Yes. Patricia closed her eyes. My family always told me that's how the world works. Take or be taken from. Use or be used. They told me people like you, the poor, the vulnerable, they didn't matter. They were just background characters in the stories of important people. That's monstrous, Michael said from behind Joy. It is, Patricia agreed. But it's what I believed. Until you, Joy. Until I watched you refuse to disappear. You were supposed to be broken. You were supposed to accept your place. But you didn't. You saved my son, you faced false accusations, you went to prison, and then you came out and built something beautiful. You proved that the background characters are the real heroes. So you tried to destroy me again. Yes. Because you terrified me. Patricia looked at Joy with something like wonder. You proved everything I believed was a lie. If people like you matter, if people like you can win, then what was the point of everything I did? What was the point of becoming a monster? Joy felt tears on her cheeks. There was no point, Patricia. You just hurt people. That's all you did. I know. But maybe, Patricia reached for the folder. Maybe I can do something different now. Take these records. Expose everyone. Use my testimony to destroy the families who thought they could buy their way out. Let me be the weapon that ends this. Why? Joy asked. What do you get out of it? Nothing. I'll be dead before the trials even start. Patricia's smile was sad. But maybe Daniel will remember that at the end, I tried to choose differently. Maybe you'll tell him that his mother, who did terrible things, finally did one good thing. Joy wanted to refuse. Part of her wanted Patricia to die with nothing, to get no redemption, no peace. But she thought about mercy, about blessing, about the 23 women who'd been trafficked because Patricia helped powerful families hide their crimes. I'll take your testimony, Joy said. I'll use everything in this folder. But not for you, Patricia. For them. For every woman you helped destroy. I know, Patricia whispered. And thank you. For seeing me as human enough to hate. For caring enough to fight me. In a strange way, you're the only person who ever really saw me. Not as Mrs. Adeyemi, not as someone's wife or mother, but as myself. Even if what you saw was a monster. You were more than a monster, Joy said quietly. You were a person who made terrible choices. There's a difference. Patricia closed her eyes, a single tear sliding down her cheek. Tell Daniel I love him. Tell him I'm sorry. And tell him to be more like you than me. Joy left the hospital with the folder, knowing it contained enough evidence to bring down some of Nigeria's most powerful families. Patricia died 3 days later. The news covered it briefly. Former socialite dies in custody, but most of the focus remained on the ongoing investigations her final testimony had enabled. At Patricia's funeral, only a handful of people attended. Daniel stood at the grave, looking lost. Joy approached him carefully. She asked me to tell you something, Joy said. She said to be more like me than her. She said she loved you. Did she mean it? Daniel asked. I think so. In her own way. Joy paused. Your mother was broken, Daniel. She did terrible things. But at the end, she tried to choose better. It doesn't erase what she did, but it's something. Daniel nodded, wiping his eyes. I'm going to spend my life trying to fix what she broke. The company, the family name, I'm going to use all of it to help people like you helped me. You already are, Joy said, thinking of the millions he'd donated, the advocacy he'd championed, the courage he'd shown in standing against his own mother's crimes. With Patricia's evidence and testimony, Michael built an airtight case. Over the next 6 months, all 15 families were investigated. 8 faced criminal charges. 12 domestic workers who'd been trafficked internationally were located and brought home. The Nigerian government, under pressure from both local and international communities, passed landmark legislation protecting domestic workers. Mercy was fully exonerated and began studying social work at University of Lagos. Joy had offered her a job at the NGO, but Mercy wanted to earn her own credentials first. "You taught me that dignity comes from doing things yourself," she said. "I want to be a social worker because I chose it, not because you rescued me." Blessing had her baby, a beautiful girl she named Joy. She became a counselor at Second Chance Home, her story of survival inspiring other women to speak up and seek help. Faith and the other victims found various paths to healing. Some stayed involved with the NGO, some moved on to other lives. But all of them remained connected, a network of survivors who refused to be silent anymore. James recovered fully and began working honest jobs, first as a driver, then eventually starting a small business with microloans from ethical lenders. He and Mercy slowly rebuilt their relationship. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. "I can't undo what I enabled," James told Joy one day at the NGO. "But I can spend every day trying to be better than I was." And Joy married Michael in a simple ceremony at Second Chance Home, surrounded by the children they'd helped, the women they'd saved, and the found family they'd built. Daniel gave her away, walking her down an aisle of orphans holding flowers. Uncle Samuel and Mom Ngozi cried through the whole ceremony. Richard attended with his new wife, watching with fatherly pride as Joy said her vows. Even Mercy was there, holding baby Joy, both of them proof that people could be saved, could be transformed, could choose better. Joy's NGO expanded to include legal aid, counseling services, and job training. They opened branches in 3 cities. The work was endless. There were always more victims, always more families trying to exploit the vulnerable, always more battles to fight. But Joy had learned something through all of this. Individual people could be monsters, but communities could be salvation. Systems could oppress, but movements could transform. Evil existed, but so did the stubborn, powerful, unbreakable force of people who refused to stay silent. 3 months after the wedding, Joy stood at a podium at a national conference on domestic worker protection. Looking out at hundreds of faces, activists, workers, advocates, survivors, she felt the weight of her journey. The girl who'd sold water in traffic. The accused thief sitting in a cell. The survivor who'd built something from nothing. The advocate who'd helped dismantle a trafficking network. "My name is Joy," she began, her voice steady and strong. "6 years ago, I jumped into a lagoon to save a drowning boy. I didn't know that one act of courage would lead to being falsely accused, going to prison, losing everything. I didn't know it would also lead to finding my purpose, building a family, and helping dismantle a system that's oppressed our people for generations." She paused, looking at Mercy in the audience, at Blessing holding baby Joy, at Faith and the others who'd survived with her. "Someone recently asked me if I regret saving that boy. If I regret jumping into that water, knowing everything that would come after. And my answer is no. Because yes, that act of courage led to pain. But it also led to purpose. It led to justice. It led to all of you." Joy smiled, feeling the truth of what she was about to say. We are not background characters in someone else's story. We are the authors of our own stories. And when we write those stories together, when we refuse to be silent, when we stand with each other, that's when we transform the world. The audience erupted in applause. But Joy wasn't done. "I visited Patricia Adeyemi before she died. And she told me something I'll never forget. She said I terrified her because I proved that people like me, people like us, we matter. Our voices matter. Our dignity matters. Our lives matter." Joy's voice rose with passion. So to every domestic worker in this room, to every vulnerable person watching this, to everyone who's ever been told they don't matter, You matter. Your story matters. Your truth matters. And together, we're going to make sure Nigeria never forgets that again. As the conference ended and Joy stepped off the stage, Michael was waiting with open arms. Daniel was there with congratulations. Uncle Samuel and Mom Ngozi were crying proud tears. Richard was beaming. Mercy was smiling. Blessing was holding baby Joy up to see. And Joy realized something profound. She'd started this journey trying to save one boy. But in the process, she'd saved herself. She'd saved Mercy. She'd saved Blessing and Faith and dozens of others. She'd even, in a strange way, saved Patricia by giving her a chance at final redemption. Some people called her a hero. Joy didn't feel like a hero. She felt like someone who'd been given a choice, stay silent or speak up, and had chosen to speak. She felt like someone who'd learned that the most powerful weapon against evil wasn't money or influence or connections. It was truth. It was community. It was the stubborn, relentless, unbreakable determination to believe that every person matters, that every voice deserves to be heard, that justice is possible when people stand together. She thought about the girl she'd been 6 years ago, selling water in traffic, dreaming of a better life, not knowing that tragedy was about to strike. If she could go back and tell that girl what was coming, would she change anything? No, Joy decided. She wouldn't change a thing. Because that girl's courage, jumping into dark water to save a stranger, had transformed into something bigger than she ever imagined. That single act of bravery had sparked a movement. It had changed laws, saved lives, inspired a nation. And it had proved the most important truth of all. That one person, armed with nothing but integrity and the refusal to be silent, could shake the foundations of power and transform the world. Joy's journey wasn't over. There were still battles to fight, still women to save, still systems to challenge. But she was ready. Because she'd learned the most important lesson of all. She mattered. They all mattered. And together, they were unstoppable. Joy's journey from water seller to national advocate reminds us that our past doesn't define us, our choices do. And when we choose courage over silence, when we stand together instead of alone, we don't just change our own story. We change the world. If Joy's resilience touched your heart, if you believe every voice matters, then you found your home at Folktales by Inaya. Every week, we share stories that remind us of our shared humanity and the power we have when we refuse to stay silent. Subscribe, and let's continue this journey together.